Hey, girlfriend.
Hey, girlfriend.
Oh, we are so excited to bring to you a expert in therapy, psychology, psychiatry. What is it? We are so thrilled to ask an expert these questions that we have gathered around mental health and the support that we need today. Are you fired up, Flachet?
I'm so fired up. I've been wanting to do this for a long, long time.
Yeah.
So, what a beautiful treat to have a girlfriend of a certain age to
Yes.
get real with us and to help us as girlfriends of a certain age figure out how can we get the help and the support we need in terms of mental health for ourselves, for our loved ones. So, let's do it.
Let's jump in. So, welcome to our guest of honor, Dr. Carey Shaffer. Hello. Hi, Carey. It's so great to have you here. So, just a little bit about our connection. Carrie and I know each other because her daughter is also a vocal singing client of mine, and she is
Ah.
fabulous. And so that's how we came to know each other. And Carrie is wonderful. And also, she is an expert in this field. So, Carrie, we're so happy you're here on Girlfriends of a Certain Age. Yay!
I'm obsessed with your podcast, so I'm excited to be actually here. I've been following you guys from the very first episode, so I'm really excited.
And I appreciate it, Carrie. You have sent me some texts that I needed to hear. I just wonderful, reassuring things about us, especially when we were first getting started. We were like, is this thing working? Or do we know what we're doing? And you were so supportive. So you were already doing some therapy, Carrie. But we're so thrilled to have you. Well, I'd love to introduce you formally, just so our girlfriends and everyone listening have a clear sense of who you are. So, Carrie is a seasoned psychologist with over 25 years of experience working with children, adults, and families in a variety of mental health settings in the Bay Area. She has worked in leadership positions for prominent East Bay child and family organizations and is currently working as a part-time staff psychologist at Kaiser Permanente's Child and Family Department of Psychiatry. In addition to her work with children and families, Dr. Carey provides psychotherapy to adults of all ages in her private practice in Berkeley, California, my hometown. Woohoo! So it's incredible. 25 years. This is what we girlfriends of a certain age get to celebrate, is that we've been doing our passion for 25 years, Carrie. So that leads me into our first question for you, which is, how did you arrive to doing therapy? What was your journey like?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a great question. And, I started by taking psychology classes in college, I think just because I wanted to understand myself. I think that's probably most therapists in the field will say they sort of came into the field because they wanted to understand themselves. So I was certainly no exception. I find people very interesting and compelling in their life stories, very fascinating. And in graduate school, I mostly focused on learning about adults and adult psychotherapy. But then as soon as I had my own child, I became very interested in child development and considering that we're all children at some point, I think it really made sense to understand children and adults. And so for most of my early career, as you said, Jessica, I worked in community mental health, which really has a very high burnout rate for a lot of
Mm.
therapists. I think most therapists actually start off in community mental health because that's where all the practicum placements are. But it's a high burnout rate. It's difficult work. So after about 15 years, I just decided to kind of shift my focus and to something a little bit more proactive and turned to private practice. And I also got a certificate in wellness coaching. So I kind of combined therapy and wellness coaching, and that just sort of shifted my practice. And that was really great for a couple of years. But actually, I found myself feeling very lonely, which is something that I think a lot of therapists also will say in private practice, is that ironically, we're talking with people all day long, but it's actually a very lonely profession if you're doing it on your own.
Yeah, I can imagine, right? You can't really befriend your clients in the
Sure.
same way. And then there's all of the, honoring privacy issue. So yeah, I could see that.
People have cohorts, but you really don't have a lot of colleagues when you're working on your own. And so I actually decided at that point to shift over to something more collegial. And I was very lucky to get a part-time position with Kaiser, which don't really exist that often. And so
Mm.
now I work, part-time with Kaiser, as you said, and part-time private practice. And it's the right mix for me now. And I feel really, really grateful. Very, very fortunate to have this particular mix in my life at this time.
I love that. So the part-time was intentional for you to kind of have that balance. Oh, I love that.
Well, it's very girlfriend of a certain age. It's figuring out who you are, how you work, who you work best with, and finding a system and a strategy that makes you happy and fulfills you as an individual.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's changed, as I said, as I've gotten older, as my child's gotten older, how I practice, how much I want to practice.
Yeah.
Um, it used to be that I never took evening clients,
Mm.
because I was, parenting. That was my time with my child. Well, she's a teenager and she's less and less interested in spending time with me. So it opens up the opportunities for sort of practicing at different times and in different ways than I used to at an earlier time in my life.
Which I just love too, as mothers, that we have that freedom and that flexibility. And it's such a wonderful dance, I think we do as our children grow. I love that you, as you had a child, got fascinated in child psychiatry and psychology. It makes so much sense, right? We go where our children go. I remember when my kids were young, I suddenly was fascinated in early childhood music education, and I started doing music at their preschool because that's what we were doing as a family. So I love how our children can really inspire steps in our career. I
That's
love that.
exactly right. I mean, my process has absolutely paralleled my parenting. So when my daughter was a toddler, I was very interested in toddlers, and that was the focus of my work. Now that she's a teen, I love working with teens.
Oh, good to know.
Noted.
With my adult clients, like, right now, I mean, I'm about to turn 50 in 3 weeks.
Woo! Welcome to the 50 Club, Carey.
That. And I'm much more interested in having clients, particularly women who are my age, who are going through the transitions that I'm going through. So I mean, I suppose that's a little narcissistic for me to kind of want to have the clients who represent me, but that's actually the path that my career has followed.
Well, that leads me into my next question for you, which is how would a girlfriend of a certain age go about finding a therapist? And more than that, like how would she go about finding the right therapist for her?
Yeah, it's a great question. I really think that the best place to start in finding a therapist is by asking your friends, but personal referrals. Most people know somebody who either has a therapist or has had a therapist. And I think that that's really the best place to start for a lot of reasons. First of all, as speaking as a therapist, when I get referrals from clients' friends, I'm much more likely to actually follow up on that referral because I know it's a personal referral. I know that they know my work, so they're speaking to kind of what they know about me. And, probably most people have had the experience of cold calling a lot of therapists and not getting called back. And especially in this day and age with therapists being so busy, I think most people would say they've had that experience. And so I'd say first thing is ask your friends, ask your community. Because there's so much virtual therapy these days, I think the friendship community it's not restricted to just who's immediately in your neighborhood. You can ask people across the state or, wherever. And so I think that's really the best place to start. If you don't know anybody who's in therapy or has had therapy, you just don't have that option. Some people do start with Psychology Today, which is, a place to go and look for therapists in your area. Can be a little daunting. I think it can almost be kind of like a dating website. You're just sort of looking at the profiles and that can be a little daunting too. So So I really say start with your friends.
I love that advice. And even the thing about dating is so spot on because there's a chemistry that has to happen. So in searching, then I think there is this sort of trial stage between a therapist and client. And asking on the client end, when do we know that we've found the right person? And like what kind of sort of general timeline should we give that relationship to know that it is the right fit?
Yeah, another great question. I mean, fundamentally, I think trust your gut of how you feel with the person. I think this is so important. And all research across all modalities of therapy really speak to the relationship between the therapist and the client. So whether you're doing CBT or psychodynamic therapy or psychoanalysis or ACT or anything, ultimately the relationship that you feel is what actually makes the change in therapy. So I think that that's sort of priority number one is how do you feel with the person you're meeting with? Some people know that after one session, and they just have a vibe in a sense. For some people, it might take 2 or 3 sessions to really feel like, is this the right person? How do you feel when you come away from the session? I mean, therapy is hard work. So it's not like we come in there and we're just feel good all the time. So sort of coming away with hard feelings doesn't mean it's not the right fit.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's important to come away feeling like, ooh, that felt helpful. That felt supportive. I want to see that person again. I feel like this is, generating change for me. So I think these are important things to kind of ask yourself on a gut level.
I like that a lot.
Me too.
I mean, because someone can take that and it's so like how we already live our lives. How do I feel when I'm with this person? The idea that you would apply the same strategies, the same thought process, same feeling process to finding a therapist to help you on your healing journey. And I love the reminder too that it is work. It's not, and it's interesting too. Like I'm a former therapist turned coach. You're a therapist and a coach, currently doing both. And people, I think, get really confused about coaching versus therapy, and coaching being a little bit more, positive and goal oriented, and therapy that we are doing more of this heavy, deep work. What are some of the key things that we should look for in a skilled and maybe even professional and meaning licensed therapist? How does a girlfriend of a certain age know what to look for, that someone is a qualified therapist?
And also, if I might put that in, and maybe this is a different answer, but the difference between the coach, the therapist, I think a lot of women don't quite know. And I realize with both of you that there's so much overlap. So do you think there's certain instances when women should be looking more for a coach or a licensed therapist? And yeah, what would you say, Carey?
That's a really good question. And I think a lot of it is about really looking at does the therapist or coach's style match your own? So really, what are you looking for? Because I think some people are looking for a more kind of action-oriented homework style coaching type approach. And that's one type of therapy. And, that typically tends to be slightly more seen in the coaching realm, although, there's lots of different ways to kind of look at the two things. But some people really like that approach. For some people, that's their natural temperament. They're doers. It's like, give me some homework. Tell me what to do. I want some action steps. Some people are much more insight oriented. They gravitate more to the more insight talk oriented therapy and the process oriented therapy, and that's what they want. And one is really not necessarily better than the other. I think it's really about knowing what is your style, what are you looking for. I think if you're somebody who is actually looking for something very specific in terms of an area of expertise, if you're looking at OCD or ADHD or addiction, or, these are things that I think really do require different levels of expertise. And you should look for somebody who has expertise in this area. So I think probably to really answer your question, it's like, know what it is that you're looking for out of the therapy experience. And then also kind of the commitment, that you want to make. Some therapies require more commitment than others.
Mm.
And what do you know about yourself as far as what you're wanting to put into therapy, whether it's weekly therapy or meeting once a month or understanding yourself. I think even getting into the process is really important.
That's so empowering too, because it really is like reminding us that we, have the ability to have our wants and our needs and bring those to the table. Because I think so often in a doctor patient, or therapist client dynamic, right? I think some people, especially who are going into therapy for the first time, feel very vulnerable, and that relationship can feel very uneven. So there's also another important question, which is when it starts to really feel off or even like red flag territory, what are some steps people can do? I personally know someone who worked with a therapist who really crossed personal boundaries, did a lot of oversharing herself, and it took my friend quite a while to kind of like get out of that relationship because they had built up this trust, and then all of a sudden that trust sort of gotten, unfortunately, it went in the wrong direction, and there were things I heard and I was like, that is not appropriate for her to be sharing with you. And then part of what was hard too was part of my friend's issue was trust issues, right? So, needless to say, when it goes sideways, what would you say people should do? Do they talk to the therapist? Do they
Report them.
report them? I mean, what would you recommend? And I know that's hard to say because there's so many case by case
Yeah.
instances. So I don't know what you would say to someone who's like uncertain if this is feeling like the right fit.
So again, going back to sort of one of the questions about knowing the right therapist is again, I say listen to your gut. Really
Mm.
listen to your gut. If something doesn't feel right, it's probably not. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the therapist is doing something nefarious or illegal or inappropriate, but if you're feeling like, ooh, this really doesn't feel right to me, it doesn't feel good,
Hmm.
that's important to listen to. Um, therapists are human too, so therapists are going to make mistakes and
Sure.
cancellations and things like that. But if you're finding that, say, a therapist is canceling on you all the time or sharing, if there's something that just feels like this is not the right, this doesn't feel professional or good to me, it's okay to listen to that. On the most extreme level, any licensed therapist is going to be registered with the Board of Behavioral Sciences, so people can make complaints if there's really egregious things that happen. But the question of like, do you talk to your therapist about your discomfort? I mean, that's a really tricky question because, like you said with your friend, some people are dealing with trust issues, some people are dealing with authority issues.
Right.
Telling somebody I don't feel comfortable with what you're saying or sharing with me, that's a really hard ask. I mean, I think we're all learning that in our own relationships to sort of speak up with discomfort. So I'm not sure how to fully answer the question other than to say
Sure.
that like people should have permission or give themselves permission to just say no, if
Mhm.
something doesn't feel right to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting you shared that story. I have a
Yeah.
friend who is actually actively in that process right now. A
Oh.
therapist who came into her life. It's a beautiful time, helped her, but now she's now paying her therapist, and she feels my friend feels like she's the therapist. Her therapist is telling her all kinds of inappropriate things, and I
Oh.
was reminding my friend. I said, "Honey, you're also a customer. You're the consumer. You
Mm-hmm.
don't need to sit there and pay her if you're feeling uncomfortable."
Yeah.
And then she was like, really? Like it sort of blew her mind, this idea that she could get out.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think we don't often think about that it is a relationship and we do want to wind it down with heart and intention, but that we absolutely can do that. We don't have to be stuck in a situation
Yeah.
where we either feel like we're being treated inappropriately. So, yeah, it is so complicated and it feels so good to talk about it out loud
Yes.
with you. So, I
Yes.
want to thank you for your vulnerability to talk about it because not enough people are.
Yeah.
That's what I think. I see way too many women in particular struggling with these kinds of issues. So we need to just bring it into the light.
And I love you too also saying, Carrie, that, at the end of the day, therapists are people. So someone might genuinely think that they're helping their client by sharing a similar situation, and it might not be what the patient or client needs. And I wonder, in certain situations, like a relationship, I think if it feels safe and good to say, oh, I feel like I've been listening more than talking, and that could build a stronger relationship with somebody, or maybe noticing when that's brought up in a session, how the reaction is, what comes of it, because something really, I think, beautiful and helpful could come of it.
And it's really, you know, look, there's different styles of therapists too, and there's not, there are some therapists who never share anything about themselves ever, and that's very boundaried, and they never cross that line. Other therapists might choose to share something about themselves. The way I always held it and learned and sort of practiced myself personally is the purpose of my sharing supportive to the client. So,
Mm.
and that's, I think, the ultimate answer, that there's something that a therapist has to ask themselves, and that is this in the service of my client? So with my own therapist, who I love, she'll occasionally share things with me if I'm talking about something related to my child or my experience, and she'll say, oh yeah, this is how I experienced that, or I can relate to that. And that actually feels really supportive to me, because it feels like, oh, we're in this together. But I would never expect her to start telling me about her relationship problems with her husband. And if she did, I would start thinking like, wait a minute, the clock's ticking and I'm paying. So, so I think it's a nuanced thing. When I work with parents, and I'm helping them with things related to their kids, I will often share my own personal experience as a parent, and I find that they find that that's helpful. Now, if I started talking incessantly about my own child, they would probably not find that helpful. So I think it's really a balance.
I love that. And I love that question. Is this in service to the client? Right? Is this in service to helping them? And that's wonderful. Yeah.
It's really beautiful. So I have another question that I think a lot of people struggle with, and there's not a lot of understanding about it, and that's about insurance. So many of us, if we're fortunate enough to have insurance coverage for mental health support, we'll see that like on our little health insurance card and think, I'm covered if I need therapy. Yay, we're saved. And then so many of us, maybe millions of women, have had this experience of calling therapists only to find out, oh, I don't take insurance. And there's so much confusion about why that is. Would you be open to sharing your perspective, what your understanding of both industries, of being a psychotherapist and of dealing with private insurance? What's going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can speak as somebody who has worked with insurance for much of my career. Really, actually, all the way up until recently. And what I can say for myself, and I could probably speak for many therapists, is that unfortunately, the insurance companies do not reimburse very well to therapists. And that's very unfortunate, because I know a lot of therapists would be very happy to be able to do this. So my own personal experience, I took insurance for 10 years, and I battled with the insurance companies to increase my rates, especially living in the Bay Area, where it's so expensive. And it's a very hard nut to crack. And so I think increasingly what I have seen is that therapists will start taking insurance, and then over time they will stop, because it just doesn't pay, unfortunately, in a really difficult, area where we have to keep our costs going. And so I think that's unfortunate. And that's been my experience, is that I've recently, part of my journey as a girlfriend of a certain age, and as loving myself and as being kind to myself, is also being willing to sort of charge what I believe I am worth. And that's very hard for me to even say those words, because even saying that out loud feels like I shouldn't say that. But, but the truth is, we work hard to get to this place,
Right.
with lots of loans and lots of life behind us. And so I really feel badly, about the fact that that's something that people have to contend with.
Well, and it speaks to, I mean, just hearing you say that you had to go to battle with the insurance companies, right? Like, I think we know that there's something off in that system when that's the case, because you guys should get a really good coverage, and you are professionals. And so that would absolutely be taxing and damaging. And if you don't have to do it, why would you? I get that.
Yeah, well, I remember when I was actually in graduate school and we got credits for seeing therapists. So I had a therapist and I was using my insurance. And I found out he was getting paid $40 a session
Wow.
to work with me. And I was embarrassed. This was maybe like 8 months into working with this guy. And then I remember feeling embarrassed, like, A, I had no idea. So it's not my fault. I didn't do anything wrong. I was utilizing a benefit that I thought I had through my student health insurance. And then to find out that this guy wasn't even making a living wage, sitting here with me. And he even came in early to work with me. And he was often late because dropping off his kid. It was so complicated. And I realized this isn't right. It's not fair. It feels like a benefit, but then everyone is sort of being hurt by this system.
Right.
It felt so yucky to me. I really struggled with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you'll hear that it can be cost prohibitive. I do want to mention that I think that some of the online therapy options have opened up some new possibilities, like BetterHelp. That seems to be a pretty affordable option for some people, if they need that. Or there's areas that have sliding scales. That's actually how I started doing therapy, through a place in Berkeley, actually, called the Berkeley Therapy Institute. And I think they were working with their grad students, so you could go in there and do like a sliding scale. I think my therapist and I were the same age in our young 20s, working it out together. And I was fortunate because he wound up being wonderful, and I worked with him for many years. So there are all of those options, and I believe there's even options for free therapy. And I don't know, Carey, if you could speak on more options like that. But it does seem like the stigma around mental health, right? And insurance companies and what they're valuing and what they're holding on to, right? There's a lot of issues at play in that arrangement, which feel really unfortunate. Like, who's winning?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any other like affordable therapy options, Carey, that you might recommend?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned this a little bit, but a lot of graduate programs offer therapy. And what I would want listeners to really hear and understand, and I actually say this in my work with Kaiser, where I actually supervise and oversee graduate students at Kaiser. I actually find graduate students to be some of the best therapists, because they're so motivated and they're so dedicated to their clients. And that's not to say that I'm not dedicated to my clients, but generally speaking, students have fewer clients. They're talking about their clients with their supervisors. They're absolutely wanting to do their very best. And maybe they don't have 25 years of experience, but they are bringing their full selves to the table. And so I actually think going to work with a graduate student is a great opportunity that's very cost effective for a lot of people and a lot better than people think. And so, like in my work with Kaiser, when I oversee students and I tell the parents that I'm working with of the kids that come in, I'm going to have a student working with you. And they say, no, I want a staff psychologist. I say, no, trust me, you're going to be much better off with a student, because they're going to give you everything. And so, I think that would be sort of my other recommendation, is to go to college counseling or not college counseling centers, but graduate programs that are where the graduate students are getting their hours. or any place like that, I think people will be very well served and very surprised.
That is such a great recommendation. And I can say that like it absolutely worked for me. And I grew with my therapist because then when he went into his private practice, it was so wonderful. It's like we both matured up, together. It was great. It was great. That's wonderful advice.
I love that.
Just focusing on you for the last couple questions, Carey, and thank you for all this beautiful advice. As a girlfriend of a certain age, quickly approaching 50, how would you say your approach has changed throughout the years? And with the wisdom that you now have, truly, with 25 years, wisdom, I mean that in the most complimentary way ever. What would you say you're doing differently now?
Yeah, well, I think like I said earlier, part of my approach has changed as I've changed. So, I've sort of clinically matched and followed my daughter's development. So, my parenting has informed my clinical work with kids, and my clinical work has informed my parenting. And so, in some ways, the advice that I offered to people when I had a toddler, the advice I offered for teens was only sort of in my own clinical understanding and not my personal understanding. So I think I bring my personal life to bear in my work, and I use it to inform my work. And so just, again, in sort of full disclosure, having gone through a divorce, I know myself personally better from that experience. And so if I'm working with somebody who's gone through a divorce, I'm going to have some of my own experience to bring to the table with that. And so I think I would just say that my life has informed me in my clinical work and softened me and given me perspective when I didn't have perspective. In my very early career, before I even had a child, I was working in the foster system, and I was working with parents who were being reunited with their kids after they had lost their children to the foster care system, and I was doing reunification work with them. I didn't know anything about the struggles of having a child. And so things that parents would do that would cause them to lose their children, just I couldn't possibly relate to that, and not that was necessarily my experience, but as a mom, I've had plenty of moments when, I'm careful about what I say on the air, but let's just say I can understand why parents would have difficulty. And I couldn't have understood that before becoming a parent. So, so my life informs my work and changes it. It gives me a lot of perspective.
Yeah.
Makes so much sense.
I love that.
And I imagine, people can feel that when they meet you, whether it's over the phone or a PTA mixer or whatever it is, and kind of check you out and kick the tires a little bit. They feel that, what you bring to the table and who you are and how you work. It makes so much sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that we as therapists have to have all the same experiences as our clients. So
right.
It doesn't mean that is the only thing that we bring to bear, but certainly having life experience, I think, makes a difference.
Oh yeah.
That's actually a really good point. I've definitely heard people struggle with that. Well, yeah, she's helped me with this, but she doesn't even have kids herself, and you can see them questioning, can they still help me? Can they still support me? Do they really get my pain? And I think it's great to ask those questions, but then also to feel into the work. Is it helping me?
Right.
Even though they may not have this exact same lived experience as me, as a client.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I had the male therapist, I thought, well, is he going to be able to work with me? Can I open up as freely? And it actually wound up being very, very helpful. But I had to kind of get over that. That felt like a hurdle at first, right? I know a lot of women will request, women therapists, and I understand that often. But in my case, it actually wound up being a really huge gift. Yeah.
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 Well, my next question for you is a little bit of a Schoolhouse Rock moment or a little PSA. And that is, what do you wish we all knew about therapy? What do you wish? What don't we know?
That's a good question. You know, this might be sort of a funny answer, but I wish that people understood that therapists actually take vacations. That, and it's not that people don't know this. And I certainly tell people this when I first start, but it almost always comes as a surprise.
Mm.
And I think the reason for that is because it's like our vacations don't necessarily align with our clients' mental health. And so, I can speak for myself personally. It can be hard to sort of do my self-care, which includes
Mm.
going on a vacation if I know that my clients are struggling or needing me. And so, it's a tricky balance. And so I almost, I guess the larger answer to that is understand that your therapist is human and that they're going to need to take care of themselves also. And
Right.
that's good modeling, I think. At
Mm-hmm.
Right, that a therapist is not a tool in your toolbox, right? It's a person, a part of your support team, and part of our support team needs to support themselves too, as well.
Yeah, and it's modeling great boundaries too, which is I have to take care of my well-being and my family and my mental health, and that is really important. I mean, honestly, with our physicians, sometimes I go to email them and they're not back in the office for 2-3 weeks sometimes,
mm-hmm.
right? So there is an important thing to know that you're all humans and that is vital for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I love that. That's a very good reminder.
Yeah.
Indeed. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking us through the kind of nuts and bolts. I feel like we got so much wonderful practical information. And I want to say too that I'm really grateful that I think mental health is becoming so much more talked about. We recently did a letter to our former selves when we were both in our 20s, right? And I remember that was about the time where I was going into therapy. And I went into it because I thought I was broken, basically, right? And I love hearing now from some of my teen clients. They're so open about, oh yeah, my therapist says this and we're working on this. It's just so much more open. There's so much more discussion about narcissism, about gaslighting. I mean, people are using these terms so freely that sometimes I'm like, I don't actually think that, I don't think everyone who annoys you is a narcissist, actually. But I just love that is becoming more valued and out in the open, and I think it's taking the stigma away. I think it's also honoring you and the work that you do for people, and I really think it's like a big healing for everyone involved. So I just love the trajectory that we're on with mental health, and not to say that there aren't issues, as we talked about, with insurance companies and all of that, but I really feel like that is shifting. I mean, have you experienced that yourself, Carey?
Absolutely. I mean, it's, what I see happening now that certainly was not happening when I was in school is all the focus on social emotional learning and curriculums that are sort of baked into schools, and the growth mindset that really has become kind of the speak of our generation, and our kids' generations, is that they see mental health as part of the whole picture of well-being. And so and they hear about that from their peers and their teachers and other students, and it's part of our language. And so I think part of what I think is really great is that people don't have to be in crisis to go into therapy anymore. I think that's where some of the stigma comes, is that
Yep.
people only went into therapy when they were in crisis, or like you said, Jessica, they felt like something was broken, or something traumatic had happened. And now people choose to go into therapy because they want to grow, not just necessarily because they feel like they're broken or they're trying to fix something, but actually it's, I want to understand myself better. I want to understand my relationships better and my family better. I want to actually be the best version of myself. And I think that that's not how we used to think about therapy. And I think that that's definitely a product of our times.
Mm.
I love that.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. Yeah.
So what we all need, and that it's now into the fabric. and we're talking about it, taking away the shame, the stigma, and everyone, not everyone, so many more of us being invited to be whole and well inside of ourselves.
Absolutely. Definitely. All right. Can we play a little quick game with you? Okay, so we love with our guests asking you this question. I know you know it, but I'm going to set you up. So now that you are in the beautiful midlife, what is something that you are no longer giving a shit about that used to just really bother you or upset you?
Well, this has nothing to do with therapy, so it's not even
Fine, great.
at all. And it might sound shallow, but I do not give a shit about fashion. I don't care. I wear what feels comfortable all the time.
Yes.
It is absolutely the way I want to be in the world. And I have to say, it's no easy task to do that when I have a 14-year-old daughter who cares a lot about fashion. Strut around in a very, it's, I have to be mindful of that because, when you have a teenager, how you show up in front of their friends makes a whole lot of difference.
Oh, right.
You know what? I really don't give a shit. And I actually love being comfortable in my skin and my body and my clothes. And that's something that I really embrace.
Oh, I love that.
I love that so much. I love that so much. And the truth is, your teen daughter will get it at some point, right? She will someday take off her very uncomfortable little tight dress or pants or whatever it is that all of us at that age thought we had to wear, or maybe we wanted to at that point in our lives, right? And realize, oh, my mom was like moving into what felt comfortable for her, and it's such a different era. I mean, I used to tease my mom in Berkeley growing up. There was a store called CP Shades. Did you guys know of that store?
No.
I remember that.
Yeah. And it was all this very flowy linen, and all the moms would wear it, right? And all of us girls would be wearing our totally different outfits. So now I totally think about those flowy linen pants, and I'm like, where can I get me some of those? Drawstrings, sign me up. I love that. Oh, well, Carey, where, if people are interested in learning more about you, reaching out to you, where can people find you?
They can go to my website, which is practicalparentingsolutions.org. And from that website, there's a link to my coaching website as well. So whether you're coming as an adult or as an adult looking for support for your child or your family, you can find me in both of those places.
Excellent. And there's a link down below. If you could just scroll below this video, you can take a look at that and click and get over to Carey's site.
Oh, thank you.
Oh my gosh, Carey, this has been delightful. It's so wonderful to have you on the podcast.
And I'm so honored.
Oh, it's just been so wonderful. Thank you for just like making it feel so welcoming and doable, and really giving us the power to continue to check in with our gut and how we're feeling. And at the end of the day, we know ourselves. And I love that message.
Right. And how normal it is to question. And, ask questions, ask our friends. You just gave us so many actionable steps that I know girlfriends will be putting into practice today.
Yes.
To find the help and support they need for themselves and their loved ones. So I just want to thank you for your vulnerability, your openness, and for just being with us, being one of our girlfriends, whether you're listening or on the pod with us. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. I think this podcast is absolutely critical, and I listen to it all the time, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be a part of it.
Oh, well, we thank you so much. That means so much to us. And we will be loving you up. Happy birthday in advance. Thank you so much, Carey. This has just been so helpful and normalizing such an important thing that is just so, so crucial. So thank you so much.
Thank you both so much.
All right. We're going to send off with a bye, girlfriend. Bye.